The Midnight Fair, a tale of desire and consequence. Megan, Jake, and Sophie were just ordinary young adults from a small town in Maine. They worked dull jobs, dreamed of something bigger, and gathered every Friday to laugh and escape the monotony of daily life. Christmas was around the corner, and the town sparkled with lights. Everyone was talking about gifts and holiday plans. But one evening, Jake shared a rumor he'd heard at work. "There's a fair," he said, winking. "It only opens at night, and only for those who know where to look. You can find unique stuff there." Sophie scoffed. "Like a flea market with a spooky vibe?" But Megan was intrigued. Her brother had recently left for college, and she wanted something special for him, something that would remind him of their childhood. "Why not?" she said. "It sounds fun." At midnight, they set out to find the fair. Rumor had it that it appeared beyond an old bridge that hadn't been used in years. When they reached the bridge, there was indeed something there, a soft light glowing through the trees. "There it is," Jake whispered. They entered. The air smelled of hot chocolate and gingerbread. Ahead of them stretched rows of tents adorned with twinkling lights. The people, both vendors and shoppers, looked peculiar. Their faces were too perfect, their smiles too wide. Each of them found something special. Megan spotted an antique locket with an intricately carved cover. Inside was a photo that strangely reminded her of her childhood. Jake bought a leather flask with an engraving he found amusing. Sophie picked up a doll, an exact replica of one she'd had as a child. "How did you know I needed this?" she asked the vendor, who only smiled. "All our items find their rightful owners," the woman replied, her eyes gleaming. When they decided to leave, the path was gone. In its place were more tents. Megan checked her watch, but it had stopped. The snowy wind had stilled. Everything around them felt unnervingly quiet. "We must have taken a wrong turn," Jake suggested, though his voice wavered. The music started again. It was different now, harsh and chaotic. The vendors, once welcoming, now seemed menacing. Their movements were jerky, almost mechanical. Sophie was the first to notice. The doll in her hands began to move. She heard a faint whisper coming from it. Jake realized his flask was heating up, burning his fingers. Megan's locket flipped open, revealing a photo that had changed. Her family's faces were now distorted. This isn't right," she whispered. "These things are cursed," Jake said, his voice trembling. They ran, but the tents seemed to shift around them. They kept ending up in the same place, as if the fair was toying with them. Ahead were only flickering lights and endless rows of tents fading into darkness. "We have to stick together," Megan shouted, noticing Sophie lagging behind. The vendors, once slow and deliberate, were now moving faster. Their jerky motions were like broken puppets, their footsteps unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Sophie screamed as one of the figures drew closer, reaching out to her. "This way," Jake yelled, spotting a faint light beyond the tents. They emerged onto an open clearing and saw it, a massive black tree with roots plunging into the earth like a bottomless pit. Its branches glowed faintly, adorned with their gifts, hanging like ornaments. "This is the center," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. "We have to return the items." They approached, but the closer they got, the colder it became, the chill cutting to their bones. Suddenly, the tree spoke. Its voice was deep, like the rustling of countless leaves. "You came seeking your desires. Are you ready to pay the price?" "What price?" Jake shouted, his voice echoing through the clearing. The tree hissed. "Your memories, your years, the things you love." Megan looked at the locket in her hand. Her brother, his face on the photo, was growing blurrier. She couldn't let this continue. Reluctantly, she held out the locket to the tree. its branches stretched out, wrapping around it and pulling it into the canopy. Sophie hesitated, her hands trembling as she looked at the doll. It was her connection to her mother, but she couldn't risk her friends' lives. She threw the doll at the tree's roots. Jake gripped the flask tightly, his knuckles white. Suddenly, he felt the tree's branches curling around his legs. Swearing, he hurled the flask to the ground. As the last of the gifts vanished among the branches, the fair began to change. The tents dissolved into the air, and the tree lost its ominous glow. Moments later, the friends found themselves standing in the snow by the old bridge. Their breaths were heavy, like after a long run. "Did we make it?" Sophie whispered, shivering. But something was different. Megan realized she couldn't remember her brother. His face was a blank spot in her mind. Sophie tried to recall her mother, but her memories were like a faded dream. And Jake looked noticeably older, his hair streaked with gray. A year later, on Christmas Eve, Megan found a small card on her doorstep. On it were the words, "Thank you for visiting. We look forward to seeing you again." What would you do if your deepest desires came at a cost too high to bear? Would you risk it all for a fleeting chance at happiness? If this chilling tale intrigued you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more stories that blur the line between dreams and nightmares. Let us know in the comments, would you have dared to enter the Midnight Fair?